Hey guys, this is Brother Lee speaking. I'm gonna go through a couple notes from things I've noticed on the last assignments that you turned in. First thing that I want to bring up is there were a lot of problems with the cube. Remember that this is a 2-point perspective cube, so that as you see here, it's not necessarily perfect, but something that I noticed is that a lot of people had some trouble with the left side on the top face of the cube in particular. If it's in 2 points perspective, you remember that these lines should ultimately somewhere way in the distance, they're gonna be converging to a vanishing point. I know this is really exaggerated, but the top line, the top line and the bottom line should be converging, meaning that they're making a V shape, even if it's very, very subtle. Let me get rid of some of these things here. A lot of you had an issue with this left face where these lines were actually, that's a little bit too dramatic, not going to a vanishing point, but actually diverging. So instead of going to a vanishing point like that, way in the distance somewhere, they were going way different directions. So when you're in perspective, that's not something that happens, so please watch out for that. There were also some cubes where the front two faces of the cube were good, the proportions and the converging lines were good, but the back lines up here on the top face of the cube were not converging as well. So remember that all of these things relate to one another. These top lines over here should also be converging to some extent, even if it's very, very subtle. Some had lines that were separating as you go farther in the distance. So remember, both sides, the back of the cube should be converging, vanishing points. I know that was from last week, but all of these things work together and are related, so keep that in mind. Also, I wanted to bring up an issue with the ellipses, and this is something that comes up a lot, but even now there's still a lot of problem with some football-shaped ellipses where the sides are still pointy instead of more rounded out. And another issue is what I would call more like a surfboard problem, where the edges or the sides of the ellipse are curved, but the top and bottom are too flat. Remember that these are ultimately circles that are kind of pitched. So if you saw a circle wouldn't look like this. A circle would be round all the way through. So remember that when you're drawing an ellipse, the top and the bottom should start tapering away as soon as they leave the topmost and bottommost parts. Okay, another thing that could actually help you with an ellipse is if you know the highest and lowest points and the farthest right and left points, what can help is actually to draw a square oops, what am I doing here? And within that square, you could draw your ellipse. So if you have that square, it'll actually help you see where the farthest most points should be. So they're just barely touching, oops. They're just barely touching the sides of the square or rectangle, and that'll kind of help you show you where the ellipse is supposed to be. And one last thing to bring up with that is remember that the ellipse doesn't slant with the cube, stay straight.